stretch it. Stretch it does not mean that we are going to make the speech longer. What it means, look at those words there, to make your speech all that it can be. The 5 senses, well, we can use the 5 senses to do that. This is such an important concept. When we talk about stretch it, we're talking about all of the delivery principles, all the words, the vocabulary that we use for speech, all gets put in this. You can use any of these things to stretch your speech well. What I want you to do is to be conscious that you are stretching it. Any time that you are asked to give a speech, there is a certain guidelines or parameters that the speech allows. So perhaps the speech is 5 minutes long, 20 minutes long. Maybe it's just 60-second introduction. Whatever it is, you've got to respect the parameters. Now, who sets the guidelines or the parameters? Typically, the person who sets these parameters is the person who asked you to give the speech to begin with. So whoever asked you to speak typically set the bandwidth and the parameters of the speech. You need to respect those. A part of respecting that is understanding that you want to fill that, though. Whatever the parameters are, you want to make it all that it can be. Let me give you the example. Here's my cell phone. Years ago, I had an Android for my first smartphone. And this was a crazy thing for me to do because I've been a Macintosh user for a long time. And I didn't know how to use it, so I didn't get the most out of it. But also, my email didn't get sent to it. And I went to the store like 5 times. They were very nice and tried to resolve it, but it just didn't work. So I had my Android for like a year and a half, and I'm paying twice as much as I was paying with not the smartphone, but the dumb phone. And it was amazing because I'm paying all this money, but I did not get the benefit of it. So I was given this bandwidth. I was given these larger parameters than the previous phone that I had, but I wasn't filling it. I was using like 10% of it. Well, what I'm trying to ask you to do is, in a speech, don't give that to an audience. Don't give the speech 10% of what it could be. I want you to stretch it and fill in that entire bandwidth. Whatever the parameters are, make it all that it can be so that you impress the audience. And in these few situations that you have to get in front of an audience, you want to give them all that you've got so that you can feel fantastic and it can actually raise your self-esteem. Now let's talk, how can we stretch it? You can consider your voice. Did you know that on any given line or sentence that you have to give in a speech, there is an infinite number of ways to deliver the line? Let's just take that word, did you know? Let me give it to you, sad. Did you know? Now I can give it to you, happy. Did you know? How about if I give it to you, sarcastic? Did you know? There's an infinite. Throw any emotion at me and I can put different emotions and I can give it a different pace, a different tone, different emphasis on the specific words, and it changes the meaning. So that context is so very important. When you get ready to deliver a speech, look at your words and try putting different emphasis and different emotion into each sentence and see how it comes out. The way it comes out the first time, don't always just assume that that's the best. Actually, let yourself play with it and try it several different ways. There are a few places that you automatically want to stretch your voice. You can do this for any number that you see. 50. Advertising 10. On February 14th, be sure that you take the opportunity to let your voice do a little roller coaster ride. Another place that you can just automatically do a stretch that makes sense is when you see conjunctions. And, but, or. You can use this as a natural pause, a natural place to put this emphasis on your words and to, I call it like, let your voice do a little roller coaster. The third place is when you have adjectives. The big red apple. You can play with those adjectives. This isn't to say that there aren't other places in a speech that you'd want to emphasize or play with the words, but these are automatics that you can integrate that can really add dimension to your speech. Now let's talk about the 5 senses. Our senses help us experience the world. Please do not limit yourself to just yourself being up there speaking with an audience. You can use other ways to incorporate your senses. Be creative. This is where you can just really leave a lasting impression on an audience. So what are the 5 senses? We can see. Well, obviously, when you are in front of an audience, you have yourself as a 3-dimensional object that's up there that they're able to see you. They're also able to see visuals, so you can incorporate visuals. You can also bring in 3-dimensional objects that they can see. So these are all examples of things that you can add to allow them to see. Pay attention to the room as well. Are there things that you could do? Maybe a board, and you can put a number on a board that can emphasize an important point in your speech. So integrate all of those. Now we also have, our ability to hear. Obviously they're hearing your words. But is there any way to put just a little short something else, a sound? Don't go too crazy on it, but if the speech allows it, then maybe add a sound. If I'm introducing a band, wouldn't I want a little bit of music? Or maybe even like if I'm at a conference and I'm introducing people for awards, couldn't I put just a little clip of some music underneath to add some excitement and some drama to the evening? Touch. Can you bring in an object that you would actually pass around that is related to your topic? Maybe you're doing a demo. If they can touch something, that would be awesome. Actually, it amplifies your message. I really also like to consider the power of the palate. What do I mean by the palate? Your taste buds, of course. If I'm giving a speech and I'm going to ask them if they remembered the points of the speech, who wouldn't want to do that at the end of a speech? Well, give them a candy bar. When I was at a women's group and I was talking to them about the fear of public speaking, I was making the point of don't whine about your speech. And so what did I give them at the end? I had 3 bottles of wine, and if they answered the questions, I gave them a bottle of wine to remind them not to whine. So here I was able to take the point that I was trying to make in the speech and actually brought it to fruition. And who doesn't, which of these women didn't want a bottle of wine? They were very excited to get it. And that made them remember the speech a bit more. Reward them, and if you can do that with the palate, that's awesome. Whenever you have an opportunity to enhance your speech, these are ways that you can really connect with your audience and that they will remember you. Sometimes the fact that you do this, you may not be the greatest, most enthusiastic speaker, but thinking well about this, stretching the speech and bringing in this other component can be the lasting impression that really makes your speech stand out. And it may not be your delivery, it's the fact that you thought about the whole thing and you made it all that it can be, even the parts that weren't about you speaking. Now the last sense is smell. Obviously, if you bring in some fresh-made cookies and they smell, that's going to be a great thing. If I'm giving a speech about culture, how could I not bring in some, great-smelling food that would just make us want to, enjoy that culture's food? Don't do things that don't make sense. I one time had a student who gave a speech. He did the Gettysburg Address, and he brought in for the Gettysburg Address a saw of what they used to use to saw off a soldier's leg. Now, it was beyond the parameters of the speech. He was a history buff, and I'm sure he went on to become a history professor somewhere, but he collected these items. This was just outside the boundaries. He went on in his next speech, he was talking about objects, and he was talking about symbols, and he actually brought in, this was a sub-point, it was a small point in the speech, and he actually brought in a Nazi flag. The whole class didn't know what to do. They were freaked out. The magnitude of that point in history and what that represented overwhelmed us, and everybody just remembered the Nazi flag and not knowing what to do with it or how to handle it, and they didn't remember the speech. So don't do something that overwhelms and actually distracts from your message. Pay attention to the parameters of the speech, what your message is, and see all that you can do to make that happen.